going first? Okay.
Welcome to New Hampshire.
Hey, everybody. Hi. How are we doing? Can you hear me? Oh, look at everybody. This is great. Exciting. Great to see you all.
Hey, everybody.
I'm Molly Kelly, and I am a proud graduate of Keene State College. And it is just great to be with all of you here tonight. It's so exciting. As you know, Beto O'Rourke has made his announcement that he will be joining others in running for President of the United States, and he's here with us tonight. It's so exciting. This is his first trip to New Hampshire, and guess what? Guess what? He has chosen this campus at Keene State College as his first stop. So, meeting presidential candidates is not new to us here.
That's right.
We're used to that, but we don't take it lightly, do we?
No.
We are excited and energized to have you here. We know that all of us take this responsibility very serious, because we know what it matters. It matters to everyone. Your voice and your vote here in New Hampshire, because we are the first primary state for a presidential primary. And so your work here, what you do, is so important in your voice, and it's exciting. In 2020, we will be electing a new president of the United States. And that election is about you. It's about each one of us. It's about our families. It's about our children. It's about the people that we care the most about here in this country and all over the world. And we need a new president who will take this country in a new direction. A direction that provides opportunities and possibilities for everyone, and will speak to each individual and treat each individual with dignity and respect.
I love it. I love it.
Tonight we have the pleasure, the privilege, and the honor to have Beto O'Rourke with us, and we're going to have the opportunity to hear from him about what his vision is for America. So I want all of you to join me to welcome a third-term congressman who gave up his seat to run for the U.S. Senate to beat Ted Cruz and almost did it.
Very close. Yeah, very close.
Yes, he and his wife Amy are proud parents of 3 children, and this is your first stop here throughout New Hampshire, and he is joining the others to be a candidate and to campaign for the Democratic nomination for the U.S. President of the United States, Beto O'Rourke.
All right. All right. Or do we have another one? Oh, can I take this one? All right.
Hey! How's everybody feeling tonight? Let's hear it for Senator Kelly, for her service to this state, to this country. Let's hear it for President Treadwell, who was outside greeting me as I came in. Let's hear it for Keene State. And let's hear it for New Hampshire. Thank you for welcoming a stranger from far west Texas. Saludos. We bring you greetings from El Paso, town in which I was raised, town in which Amy and I are raising our 3 kids. Ulysses, who's 12 years old, Molly, our Molly, who's 10, and their little brother Henry, who is 8. All 3 of them go into the same world-class public schools that I went to when I was a kid in El Paso, in an extraordinary dual language program, where in one day they're learning math in Spanish, the next day they're learning it in English. They're making the most of the fact that we live in the largest binational community in the Western Hemisphere. 3 million from 2 countries, speaking 2 languages with 2 histories, 2 cultures, joined, not separated, by the Rio Grande River in the heart of the Chihuahuan Desert, at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, an extraordinarily beautiful place, something that is greater than the sum of the parts or the people involved. It also so happens that El Paso, Texas, my hometown, the defining border community along the 2,000 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border, is one of, if not the safest city in the United States of America. Safe, secure, strong, successful, not in spite of the fact that we are a city of immigrants, but I would argue because of the fact that we are a city of immigrants. If you think about it, those El Pasoans, tens of thousands, a quarter of those with whom we live, were born somewhere else, chose us, left their home, their comfort, their language, their families, their nation, because they were called to us. They wanted to get ahead, they wanted their kids to get ahead, but they also wanted to contribute to our shared success. And their very presence makes us that much stronger, that much safer, and that much more likely to be successful. We lose sight of that and the fact that we are comprised of asylum seekers and refugees and immigrants the world over for as long as we have been a country. We lose sight of that at our own peril. And when we do, this is what happens. We greet our fellow human beings who are leaving the deadliest places in the Western Hemisphere, some of the deadliest places on planet Earth, whose own governments can no longer protect them, and most importantly, the lives of their kids. There's no other explanation for what would compel you to scoop up your baby girl, your little boy, and walk 2,000 miles. If you are lucky, you are atop, not inside of a train known as the Beast or La Bestia, to come here to this country, our front door at the Texas-Mexico border, penniless, not knowing the language, not having a friend in sight, just wanting to get that little kid of yours the help that they need, seeking the salvation, the refuge that this country has promised to the tempest-tossed and those who have no home for as long as we have been a country. And at that most desperate and vulnerable moment, this is what we have done to too many. We have literally, by force, taken that child from the arms of her parent, deported that mother back to the very country from which she fled in the first place, placed that child in a cage, separated them with no hope in too many cases of ever being reunited again. And lest we think this is just owing to one man in one position, for as long as we are a democracy, and the people are the government, and the government is the people, until every single one of those children is reunited with every single one of their families, it is on all of us. It becomes our responsibility to make this right. I want us not only to honor our own asylum laws, which this president is failing to do. I want us to rewrite our existing immigration laws in our own image, in the image of our communities, yours and mine alike, reflecting our values, the reality on the ground, and our own self-interest. We could begin by freeing every single one of the more than 1 million dreamers from any fear of deportation. Make them U.S. citizens today so they can contribute to their maximum potential over the course of their lifetime. Do not do this at the price of their parents, the original dreamer, those who made the god-awful decision to come here in the first place because perhaps they had no other choice. They did what you and I would do in the same set of circumstances, what any human being would do in the same set of circumstances. Let's make sure that the more than 11 million undocumented people in this country, very often working the toughest, the most back-breaking jobs that no one born in this country can be found to work, are able to come out of the shadows to get right with the law, by that very act making us safer and more secure, knowing exactly who is in our communities, and also ensuring that those who already contributed so much can continue those contributions ultimately as U.S. citizens in the greatest democracy this world has ever known. Are you with me on this? I'm excited for all of us to work together for all of us on an economy that works for everyone, not so well for the very few and not well enough for the far too many. I'm meeting school teachers, educators, school bus drivers, cafeteria workers, custodians, those who are responsible for the education of our children and the welfare of this great country going forward, who are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet, when before them they have the most important job, unlocking a lifelong love of learning within every single child before them. I want them focused on that. I want them paid a living wage. I want every working American to know that we've got their back, that they can earn a wage that allows them to live with dignity, to focus on their kids in their homes, and to provide for the generation to come. To accumulate wealth, especially in those families and in those communities, and especially communities of color that have been actively prevented from accumulating wealth from the very beginning of this country. Because, yes, we are a country of asylum seekers and refugees and immigrants, but we are also a country that brought people here in bondage and through their slave labor literally built the foundation and the wealth that we are so proud of today, and we're able to share in almost none of it. There is 10 times the wealth in white America today there is in black America today. The ability to make a down payment on a home, to start a business, to afford to come to Keene State is out of reach for far too many of our fellow Americans. This economy has got to work for absolutely everyone. We've never had this deep a division between the haves and the have-nots. We never had this kind of income and wealth inequality unless you go all the way back to the last Gilded Age. And the progressive response that concentration of wealth, power, and privilege provoked included people like Theodore Roosevelt, who said you will never have something approaching popular democracy if you don't have something approaching economic democracy. Every single one of us, and especially our kids, have to see a future in this country. And that future is fading for far too many, or never really was an option for too many more. If we're going to meet those challenges, we're going to meet the challenges of a healthcare system in, get this, the wealthiest, the most powerful country the world has ever known, the most technologically and medically advanced, and in the year 2019, there are people in this country dying of diabetes. There are people in this country dying of the flu. There are people in this country dying of curable cancers because they cannot see a doctor. They may be insured but cannot afford the copay on their life-saving medications. They cannot take their child to a therapist so that she's well enough to learn in the next day of school. In my home state of Texas, the largest mental health care provider in the state is the county jail system. My fellow Texans with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, literally getting arrested on purpose because the jail cell is the one place that they are guaranteed a roof over their head, the ability to be fed and clothed, prescribed the psychotropic medications that will, at least temporarily, make life bearable. Maybe they see a therapist or a social worker, and then they're back out on the streets. Not only is that unconscionable and immoral, it's an incredibly expensive way to fail one another. We're losing out not just on that person's earning potential over their lifetime, the things that they'll create, that poem that they're going to write, that punk rock band that they're going to start, that family that they're going to raise, that job they're going to work, those taxes they're going to pay. But as they get closer to a premature death, they have no insurance and no way to pay for their hospital care at the emergency room, you and I will pick up that bill together in higher premiums and higher taxes. That's why we must come together as a country, not as a party, transcend the differences and the divides of geography and party and any other difference that doesn't matter at this defining moment of truth, and guarantee every single American high-quality health care without exception. And that means primary health care, that means mental health care, and that means every single woman makes her own decisions about her own body. For those who, in the wake of an administration that doesn't believe in the facts, doesn't deal in the truth, rejects the science that is available to us, is beyond the shadow of a doubt. For those of you who were marching for science 300 years after the Enlightenment, we salute you. We shouldn't have to do it in this country, but we're grateful that you did. It was a reminder that those scientists have concluded that not only is climate change real, not only is it caused by our own excesses and inaction, but that it is harming us, taking the lives of our fellow Americans and our fellow human beings all over the world right now as we stand together here in New Hampshire, in Texas, in Houston. 58 inches of rain fell from the sky in 2017. It's the landfall record in North America for as long as we've been keeping records in North America. And it was the third 500-year flood in just the last 5 years in southeast Texas. People who had not rebuilt their homes from the last flood were flooded yet again. Lives lost in the process. The scientists say that climate change will produce more of those floods. They'll be more devastating and profound, and they will be yet more frequent than they have already been. It's the same message that they have for the farmers in West Texas and in the Panhandle. Those droughts from which they've just emerged, those droughts will become more severe. They will undermine our ability to grow our own food, our own fiber, our ability to feed and clothe ourselves, to feed and clothe so much of the rest of the world. The civil war in Syria, the wildfires in California, we literally are making it happen. And unless we act in the 12 years, which the scientists also agree, within which we still have time, there will be a hell visited upon our kids and grandkids and the generations that follow that we can only imagine. If you were worried about 400,000 apprehensions at our southern border with Mexico last year, wait until some of the countries in the Western Hemisphere are no longer inhabitable by human beings. The refugee crisis then, here and all over the world, is beyond our imagination right now. But we still have time to act. And by the time Ulysses is my age in 2050, I want him to look back on us, all of us right here at this moment, this country at this defining, pivotal moment of truth, and be proud of what we chose to do together. And that we didn't do it by half measure, and we didn't do it by half of us. It was rural and urban, Republican and Democrat, coming together to face the singular existential challenge of climate change before it was too late. Freeing ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, investing in those communities that have disproportionately borne the brunt of climate change thus far, making sure that we don't disengage it from our larger economy, and that the gains are shared with everyone and not just concentrated in the hands of a few. If we put our minds to it, this country, put to the test, can meet that challenge and can reassert its global leadership to ensure that the nations of the world are convened around this shared, otherwise intractable problem. I know we can do it. This country, when the call has come in the past, has always answered it. This is our moment of truth right now. You with me on this one? Lastly, I was in Pennsylvania earlier today. Let's hear it for the one gentleman from Pennsylvania. Two. And all day as we drove the 8-hour drive from Penn State to here, we were calling into New Hampshire. Calling into my good friend, Annie Custer, with whom I sat on the House Veterans Affairs Committee for 6 years. Calling your amazing senators, calling your state reps, calling folks from all over the state to find out what's going on here. So proud of your response to the crisis that you have seen endured more than any other state in the nation of opioid abuse and overuse and death. The fact that in the face of losing 70,000 of our fellow Americans to drug overdose deaths, you as a state and as a people have decided this will not be a problem of criminal justice. This will be an opportunity for public health. We're going to care for and show compassion to those who are struggling. And we're going to acknowledge an incredibly warped system of justice in this country. When folks like those at Purdue Pharma can sell these addictive opioids to prescribers. When 9 out of 10, or maybe the number is 4 out of 5, but the vast majority of those who are addicted to opioids today began with a legal prescription. And those executives understood the addictive properties of what they sold, but did not share that with the public. And not a single one of them has done a single day in jail, and yet we have the largest prison population on the face of the planet, disproportionately comprised of people of color, far too many there for possession of a substance that is legal in most states of this country, marijuana. And though Americans of all races and ethnicities use marijuana at the same rate, only some are more likely than others to be arrested, to serve time, to upon release be forced to check a box so that they're unlikely to get that job because of that past conviction, ineligible for student loans and scholarships to attend this university and better themselves. We need real criminal justice reform. We need to end the prohibition on marijuana, expunge the arrest records for everyone arrested of possession for something that's legal in so many other places, and make sure that we have a full prosecution and accountability for those who are responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans in this country. Sorry. All of this is only possible if all of us come together. The greatest mechanism humankind has ever devised for tackling challenges of this scope and scale is democracy. And our democracy right now is so badly broken, our institutions captured and corrupted by big, dark, unaccountable money, by that concentration of power that I just described, by a system of suppression that keeps some out and allows others in. In Texas, we ranked 50th in the nation in voter turnout. Not because we love our democracy any less than you do here in New Hampshire, but our state legislature was so successful of drawing some people out of a congressional district based on their race or their country of national origin, that we really did produce a system where some people's votes counted for more than others, and some just dropped out. No longer a reason to vote or to share their voice, literally drawn out of their democracy. We have to make sure that not only do we get big, unaccountable money out of politics, and that's why I don't take a dime of PAC money in this campaign. We have to have a new Voting Rights Act so every single American can participate in the democratic process. We have to end the practice of racial gerrymandering and gerrymandering at all so that citizens decide the boundaries of their districts and have every chance to compete. If we fix our democracy, we will then be able to fix every single one of these challenges that I just laid out. There's been no better moment, no greater moment for us to define ourselves by our ambitions, to ensure that our promise to each other and to the generations that follow, our kids and grandkids, is kept. This is on us, every single one of us, and that is why I'm so grateful to be here with you, to tell you that I want to serve you as the next President of the United States of America. Thank you for having me out. I'm going to do my best to take as many questions or comments or suggestions or ideas or guidance or advice as we can and get as many people into the conversation. Cynthia, we have another mic. If you'll look for Cynthia, she's wearing a black cap and a green shirt. She'll try to bring you the microphone so that everybody can hear your question. Thank you all for having us out. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wrote this down, but so what would you do to reestablish our relationships with our allies and solidify the role of NATO around the world?
Great question. So we were in West Burlington, Iowa, and we were talking about climate change, and a farmer stood up and she said, You know, all these things that you're talking about that we have to do to meet this challenge, why does America always have to do this stuff? Why is this going to be on my back? Why do I have to ask my family to do more and sacrifice? And she really had a point. Even if we did everything within our power, even if we stopped emitting even an ounce of greenhouse gases from this country, we need the rest of the world to participate and contribute if we have any shot at getting this solved. It's really going to be tough because we are the lone country in the world today that is not a signatory to the Paris Climate Agreement. We used to be the indispensable nation. Now we are set apart from every other nation on Earth. We're going to have to reinforce our alliances, our partnerships, our agreements with the countries of the world, those that we've already built, and you mentioned the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We're also going to have to build new ones, especially with those who in some cases we don't agree with. It's the only way that we're going to meet and face these challenges. This trade war that the president has entered us into with China, these tariffs that he's levied and the reciprocal tariffs that have been levied in return, that hurt our ability to export into foreign markets, hurt our farmers and ranchers and producers, hurt the people who make things in this country that are destined for other markets around the world. This is hurting our economy, it's hurting our families, and it's also defying an ironclad rule of American foreign policy, which is we never go to war, including a trade war, without allies. Before entering this war, the president alienated the EU, alienated Mexico, alienated Canada. Imagine if we had all of those countries at our back. Then we would be prepared to take on China and the manipulation of their currency, the manipulation of trade practices that allows them to dump steel and compete unfairly on the global stage. So I want to make sure that we see the strength in numbers, in partnerships, in friendships, and alliances. It's the only way that we're going to meet these challenges. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
our
you.
next question, right here.
So I wrote this one down, but over the past 100 years, thousands of Palestinian citizens have been killed or exiled by the Israeli government. And when you were running for Senate, you accepted over $200,000 from pro-Israel lobbyists. So my question is, do you support Palestinian citizens who are experiencing genocide and discrimination in their own homes? And if so, why did you accept this money?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So in our campaign for U.S. Senate in Texas, as I mentioned, we don't take PAC money and didn't take money from any concerted effort from any group. Anyone could make any contribution up to the federal limit. Folks will say you were the single greatest beneficiary from this group or that group, or folks who work for this industry or that industry. We raised more money in small dollar contributions than any other Senate candidate in the history of the country. So there are a lot of groups represented in that. If you're asking if the contributions connect to the policy that I support, the answer is no. And so I'll tell you the policy that I support. I believe in peace and dignity and full human rights for the Palestinian people and for the Israeli people. The only way that I know of, and there are probably a lot of people who are a lot smarter on this issue than I am, to achieve that is a two-state solution. Now, we're not going to be able to achieve a two-state solution unless we display some American leadership. In some cases, facts on the ground are being changed as we speak. It's making it harder for there to be a contiguous Palestinian state. We need to make sure that we keep settlement construction limited, that there's no future settlement construction or expansion in the West Bank. We also need to make sure that the lives and safety of those who live in Israel is guaranteed as well. Right now, we don't have the best negotiating partners on either side. You have a prime minister in Israel who is openly sided with racists, who in a previous election warned that the Arabs were coming to the polls. And on the Palestinian side, you have an ineffectual leader in Mahmoud Abbas, who's not been very effective in bringing his side to the table either. Now listen, we have to have the humility to understand that we cannot impose a solution on any people anywhere. See 18 years and counting in Afghanistan, 27 years and counting in Iraq. Plenty of other examples. This is something that the Palestinian people and the Israeli people must decide for themselves, but given our role and our support for both sides, the aid that we provide, we have a seat at that table and we should acknowledge it. And we should do everything that we can to ensure that there is peace for both people on both sides of that line. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Above you.
I'm going to follow Cynthia, who's got a microphone.
I'm above you on the stairs. Up here, above you. Here we go.
There we go.
Hi, thank you for coming out tonight. I was curious what changes you would suggest be made to allow every citizen the right to vote in this country.
From what age?
It's a great question. What changes do we need to make so that every citizen can vote in this country? First of all, and I speak from our experience in Texas, I'd get rid of these racist voter ID laws that have been so successful in suppressing tens, hundreds of thousands of votes. In Texas, you can use your ID to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the ballot box. You cannot use your identification, your student identification at Texas Southern University or any other institution of higher learning to prove who you are at the ballot box. So that's one step. I mentioned we need a new Voting Rights Act in the states of the former Confederacy that have a consistent history of keeping some voters out of their elections or running for office or having any say in how they're representing or being those very representatives themselves. We need to make sure that there's Department of Justice federal oversight of the voting system. We have kept too many people out for too long. We need same-day voter registration in this country, in every single community, everywhere. And as I mentioned, right now we have a practice by which members of Congress choose their voters, literally get behind closed doors in a room and draw out their own congressional districts. We need citizen-led, nonpartisan, no politicians like me allowed in the room, redistricting commissions that draw these districts fairly so everyone has an even shot getting elected or voting for that person that they want to be elected. There are so many ways to bring so many millions more Americans into the process. And lastly, this is the point of why I'm here right now, we who are asking for your vote, for your trust, for this position of power, need to campaign everywhere for everyone. In Texas, we went to each one of the 254 counties of our state, no matter how blue, no matter how red. I went to Keene County, which is not only the reddest county in the state of Texas, it may be the reddest county in the United States of America, voted for Donald Trump by 96% in the 2016 election. But if we don't show up everywhere, then we can expect what we've gotten over the last 10, 20 years. Everyone is deserving of being heard, of being respected, of being fought for, of being served, regardless of who they voted for last time or who they will vote for next time. When we campaign that way, that's the way we're campaigning in this one, we can expect to have greater participation, greater support, and to build the coalition, the consensus necessary to hit the ground running on day one. Thank you for your question. Appreciate it.
I'm going to have to follow the microphone, wherever that is. Okay. Oh, there you go.
There we go.
So my question is about nuclear weapons. So the president just withdrew the United States from the INF, and we don't seem to be able to find a solution with North Korea. So my question is, what is your stand on nuclear weapons?
A couple of ideas here. One, at a time that we are $22 trillion in debt, and deficit spending to the tune of $1 trillion annually adding to that. Debt that was accrued in wars that we've been fighting going back to 1991 in the first invasion of Iraq. 6 successive presidential administrations, we are still there. Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Yemen. Those wars cost money. Those countries we rebuild after we've invaded cost money, adds trillions of dollars. Tax cuts, 2 of them in the George W. Bush administration, a $2 trillion tax cut in the Trump administration, the benefits of which flowed disproportionately to the wealthiest and to corporations. Why would we then spend more than $1 trillion to modernize our nuclear arsenal at a time that our goal should be to denuclearize this world? Now, I want to make sure that that arsenal's modern, keeps us safe, ensures the national security of the United States and the security of our allies to whom we are treaty bound by the 5th article of the NATO agreement. But I also want to make sure that as fiduciaries of your tax dollars, we're responsible with how we spend that money at a time of record military spending. You mentioned North Korea. Though the president has shared with us that he's fallen in love with Kim Jong-un, a brutal dictator who has the blood of Otto Warmbier on his hands, who tortures and kills and starves his own citizens. He's done nothing to reduce that country's nuclear potential or their capability of delivering a nuclear warhead to this country. So I want to make sure that we have effective negotiations. And to look for an example of that, I go back to the Barack Obama administration. At a time that Iran was racing towards obtaining a nuclear weapon, which could be used against our forces in the Middle East, might be delivered to the continental United States, might be used against our allies, we were peacefully, without firing a shot, without invading, I'm sorry I keep kicking you, without invading another country in the Middle East, we were able to halt their progress towards obtaining a nuclear weapon, and by so doing, halted an arms race that would have seen Saudi Arabia trying to obtain nuclear weapons and other countries and powers in that region. So the pursuit of peace, but an effective pursuit of peace, to contrast the two administrations, is what we need. Judicious spending on our armed forces, on our service members who are overseas, and making sure that we don't add to the nuclear proliferation that we see around the world. Our goal should be to reduce the number of nuclear weapons, not increase them. So thank you for the question. Really appreciate that.
To your right.
All right.
Over here. Over there.
There you go.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. It's great to hear you. And I just wanted to ask, I'm very concerned about the division in the Democratic Party between the progressive branch and the more establishment moderate branch. And I just want to know what you think you can do to bring the Democratic Party together.
We're really lucky right now that there are, I'm not sure how many candidates running for president, between 13 and 37. And they represent such a wonderful cross-section of not only our party, but of our country in the expertise, the experience, the skills, the life stories that they bring to bear on these challenges and these opportunities. I think that is a good thing. And if we purport to be the world's greatest democracy, then we have the capacity to have these conversations and these debates. We should always do so respectfully, civilly. We may come to different conclusions. It doesn't make us any less of a Democrat or an American, at least in my opinion. You'll never hear me denigrate or demean or vilify someone who's running. I'm grateful that they're running. And we should always remember, I hope, that come summer 2020, we'll all be on the same team, behind the same nominee, whoever she or he is. We'll want them to be successful against President Trump, and we'll want them to be successful as the next president, ready to go, with our full support. I'll only tell you that this philosophy that I have, that we try to demonstrate in the campaigns that we have run, is to be there for everyone, listen to everyone. It may help explain in the endorsements that I've received so far from my former colleagues in the House. I've got an endorsement from a member of the Blue Dog Caucus, the most conservative Democratic caucus in Congress. I have endorsements from the more moderate caucus, the New Democrats. And I also have an endorsement from the Progressive Caucus. I think we can bridge these differences, define ourselves not by what divides us, by what we want to accomplish together. Many different paths to get to universal health care. Many different paths to get to true criminal justice reform. Many different paths to get to a greater equality of economic opportunity. Let's listen to everyone, because it's going to take all of us, or as many of us as we can get. Let's find the common ground, enlarge it where we can, and invite everyone in to the conversation. So that's the way I'm going to pursue this nomination. It's the way in which I hope to serve. But I tell you, I look forward to the conversation and the debates. I'm thinking that the United States of America has the capacity to have them. It'll make us better for doing so. Thank you for the question.
Okay, I'm to your far right, behind the counter. I have time for 2 more questions. They're right
Gotcha.
here.
Okay.
Hi, Beto. I drove 2 hours to come and see you from Massachusetts, and I am honored to have this chance to ask you a question. I hope to be I hope to go to vet school this year, which is the freshman with the highest suicide rate and highest debt-to-income ratio. And I would like to know what you will do to first undo what Donald Trump is doing to current student loan reform and how you will make it better.
First of all, thank you for making the drive here. I'm honored that you would do that. Grateful that I have the chance to meet you. Hope to come over and shake your hand at the end of the town hall and the event tonight. One of the things that I learned by listening to the folks who live in New Hampshire and the people who represent the folks who live in New Hampshire is I believe you have the highest level per capita of outstanding student loan debt in the United States of America. Yeah, there's nothing to cheer about there. Nationally, $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. I think last year, on average, graduating college seniors had $37,000 on their back that they're going to be paying back. I think this year it's $40,000. So it is climbing. The first thing that we should do is stop digging the hole. Let's make sure that every graduating high school senior is not just college ready, but is career ready. Let's make sure that we make investments that connect with community colleges, where at 18 years old, without taking a dime of debt on, you might be able to graduate with an associate's degree under your belt, or 1 year towards a welding certification. That second year, hooking up with the local union, starting that apprenticeship program. By the time you're a journeyman, you're making $30, $35. If you're in Texas, you're making 6 figures as a welder. An in-demand, high-skill, high-wage profession that we're not producing enough trained Americans to fill right now. If you are willing to do some public service and you've got that debt on your back already, let's find a way to forgive it. Unfortunately, in the budget that the president just announced, in order to finance this wall with Mexico that'll cost you only $30 billion, that'll require us to take our fellow Americans' land through eminent domain, their farms, their ranches, their homesteads, because it will not be built on the international boundary line, which is the center channel of the Rio Grande River. It'll be built sometimes miles into the interior on our fellow Americans' property. He's taking resources out of the student loan forgiveness and financing program. Here's the deal. There are 49,000 funded, authorized, unfilled positions at the VA. 49,000. We lose 20 veterans a day, every day, by their own hand. 16 of those 20 were unable or unwilling, for whatever reason, to go to the VA and see that provider who could literally make the life or death difference for them. If you're wanting to work at that VA in your hometown or a community that needs your intellectual capital and talent, let's forgive that debt that you've accrued. If you're willing to teach school in a community that needs you, kids who need you, let's forgive your debt. If you're willing to invest in a community that is losing talent and young people, let's invest in you. So stop digging the hole by making it easier for people to get an education or a career. Let's make sure that you don't accrue debt by attending a publicly financed 2- or 4-year institution. And then if you already have that debt right now, let's refinance it at a lower rate or forgive it if you're willing to commit to public service. Those are some ideas to make it a little bit better for more people. Thank you for making the drive down.
Okay, this is going to be our last question, but if folks want to stay, we're going to do a line by the door. To take
So Cynthia's saying this will be our last question, but if anybody wants to stay, we'll be over on this side of the hall just to say hello to everyone. If you drove 2 hours, if you live right here, we want to be able to say hello and to thank you for coming out. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for coming. So a really important issue to many college students is campus sexual assault. And clearly this administration has proven their disinterest in combating this issue. So I just wanted to know what your administration would do to combat campus sexual assault and the adjustments you would make to Title IX to ensure that every victim is heard.
Yeah. Great question. So every student on every campus should be assured of their own safety, that they will be treated with respect and with dignity. Every woman, every man. These changes to Title IX make it less likely that we're going to be able to do that. So you asked what I would do. I would restore Title IX to its previous higher standard. I would make sure that the Department of Education plays a role both in the authorizations and the funding to make sure that we have the resources to investigate domestic assaults, violence, and abuse on campus. I would make sure that perpetrators and assailants are held to the highest level of justice and that there is true accountability going forward. Thank you for asking the question. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you all for having us out today. Thank you, Keene State. We are grateful that this is the first stop in New Hampshire. Always remember it. We'll see you soon. Thank you all. Thank you.
Yep, okay. Thank you.
Has the orange dude given you anything yet?
No, but I'm expecting that soon.
That'll be a
You've
been here 5 hours. Beto, get a picture with Scarlett, all right?
Will you put your hand under the shirt so I can see?
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, what's your name?
Thank
Hey guys, we're gonna have a picture over there with you during my
May I
talk.
ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
You're from the home of big oil, and you've voted and spoken often in support of fossil fuels. Tell me why I should trust you to fight fight big oil, resist fossil fuels, and stop climate change.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for the question. I don't know that I totally agree with the characterization, but I'll answer the spirit of your question. You're right. I'm from the home of much of the country's oil and gas industry. I'm also from the home of the country's largest provider of wind energy. I'm also in a state that is about to take the lead in the generation of renewable solar energy. The two fastest growing jobs in America are wind and solar jobs. So for our ability to meet the obligation of the next generation, combat climate change, and create the high wage, high skilled jobs that we need, it's in our national interest to invest in renewable energy. And as I said out loud, and I'll say it again to you one-on-one, we have to transition as quickly as we possibly can from our reliance on fossil fuels, from the emission of greenhouse gases. We will literally cook this planet and cook the generations that follow ours to death. We're already seeing widespread devastation. I think that any community that will be impacted by fracking should be able to decide whether they want that operation there.
So we're fighting a pipeline in New Hampshire, more than one.
Yeah.
And so, you just came from the fracking fields of Pennsylvania, and we're really concerned here that there's a lot of gas expansion push in the Northeast, and I've heard you say that you support all types of energy. If you're telling us that you're going to transition us away from fossil fuels, when does that happen? How long is it going to take? Are you going to support the Green New Deal, and are you going to say no to frack gas?
So, yes, I support the Green New Deal. Yes, I understand that as close to 2030 as we possibly can, we have to have this economy in this country fully transitioned off a reliance on fossil fuels. But yes, I also drove here in a Dodge Grand Caravan that burns gasoline, and the oil and fossil fuel energy needs that we have to be extracted from, refined somewhere in the world. And I want that to be in this country for as long as we are using that. But I also want to make sure that we speed that transition. When it comes to fracking, as you mentioned, I just left Pennsylvania, where that governor ensured that on public lands, you can no longer operate fracking sites and you can't build new ones going forward. I come from a state where some municipalities have elected to not allow, and I'm thinking of Denton in North Texas, have not allowed fracking to take place, and the state of Texas has overruled them. I believe in those local communities and local stakeholders. If you do not want that operation near you, then you should not have that operation near you. If you have a pipeline coming through your community, you should have a seat at the table. I think that's the right way to do it, but I think we also have to acknowledge that we're still using these fossil fuels right now. So there's got to be a responsible transition. I also just met a family member of a coal miner in Pennsylvania, and she said, I want to make sure that as you transition, you talk responsibly about what that means to our lives, our communities, and our families. We literally have built and fueled the success of this country. There should be some respect paid to us. This may have been the fuel of the past, it may to some degree be the fuel of the present, it may not be the fuel of the future, but help our communities in this transition. One of the reasons I like the Green New Deal is that not only does it describe our challenges, how we will organize this economy around them, but it says that there are communities that will be affected, and we should invest in those communities as well. There are communities that have already been hurt, and we should put those communities first. So I like that by and large, all of us understand our obligation, the challenge before us, and are getting around to the same page on how to meet those challenges. So appreciate your questions.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there. Hey, thanks for coming out. Tell me your name.
Caden.
Caden, nice to meet you, bud.
Nice
Thanks
to
for
meet
doing
you
this.
too.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
There's my business card.
Oh, right on.
When you're in Massachusetts, in Pittsburgh, you come see me.
Lobster.
You have time for a selfie?
Sure.
We got people waiting in line, guys. They're waiting.
I gotta.
Last
can I
one.
take-
Last one. Grab it real quick, and then we're gonna. Folks
Thank
are
you.
waiting.
Right Thank
Here
you.
we go. Here we go.
Always 9 hours, yeah. Straight.
Head out. Just want to say hi, man.
Hey.
Come down to Plymouth, Mass. We're gonna chance.
Okay.
His hometown.
We will.
I'll reach out.
Thank you. Tell me your name.
Dan Zotos.
Dan Zotos. Okay. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Hey.
Sounds good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to
I'm
meet
for
you.
you.
Thank you.
You're
Grateful.
welcome.
And before this
Hi. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
You gonna do a guess?
Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
After what?
Can you push?
It's a crazy thing to do.
Did you say pictures or meetings? Okay. You got it. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for
really
coming.
appreciate it. Yeah, I wouldn't miss it.
Ready? All right, take a step back. Ready? 1, 2, and 3. There you go. We're going to exit that way next. Come on in.
Hi, Beto.
Here we go.
I'm good. I drove down from Montreal, Canada.
There you go. Thank you. Next.
Thank you for doing it. Really appreciate it.
We're going to go quick.
Hey,
Here we go.
tell me your name.
1, 2, and 3. There you go. We got it. Next. Here we go.
Oh, thank you.
1, 2, and 3. We got it.
Thank you very much. This way. Thank you so much. Hi. Kids, thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, thanks for being here. Thank you very much. Hi, thanks for being here.
Thank you. All from South.
Right on.
Thank
you for coming out. Hey, nice to meet you. Thank you. Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hey, thanks for asking the question. You got us started. Hey, thanks for coming out. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, thanks again. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, right this way. Ma'am, right over this way.
Hey, thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much for being here. Great, thanks so much.
Right this way. Hey, how are you? Yay! Right this way. Hi. Thanks for coming out. Thank you. Hey, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming out.
I'm sorry to catch you off guard with the dog before.
Oh no, that was okay. I was like, what's going on?
Well, we really appreciate you coming out to New Hampshire.
Tell me the dog's name.
Paco.
All right, we gotta keep moving, keep moving. We're gonna keep it moving. Here we go.
Hey.
Ready?
Nice to meet you.
We got it. Thank you so
Thank you very much.
Please, thank you so much.
Hey.
Here we go.
Sure, real quick.
I'm from St. Connecticut, so like gun control and gun reform is like...
No questions, guys. I'm sorry. It's just a quick picture.
No president has really done anything since St.
Universal background checks for sure, and I support an assault weapons ban. So military weapons designed to kill people have no place being sold into our communities. And I know it can be controversial, and I think we have to make very clear that if you own one, continue to use it responsibly. Let's not sell any more there. But I got to tell you, Elizabeth Esty was a good friend of mine in Congress, represented an area near there and just brought home the devastation that Sandy Hook and the surrounding communities felt. We lost a lot of people in the Santa Fe High School shooting. So
we have a lot of people.
I know we do, but it's really important, and I want to make sure that I answer your question. Thanks.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Hi.
Hi, my name's Lisa. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Thank
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
As big as you want.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Why don't you hand me those? And I'll give them on the way out. Thank you.
Oops. Hey.
Hey.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. Hey. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Right on.
I was going to ask you about one, so I'm glad that came out right
Oh, good. Yes, you heard our answer.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for wearing the vintage tee. Appreciate it. Yeah. Hey, Beto. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were a big influence on Nirvana and some other bands. They're from Arizona, so not too far from El Paso. Hey, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Hola. How are you? Good to meet you. Right on. We love Massachusetts. We were just through there right now. So we'll come back. Thank you.
Open it. Marlboro, Massachusetts.
Okay. You got
Honestly,
it.
I put in an application to see.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Ready?
She'll text you the. Sorry.
Great picture. There we go. We're going to trade.
Thank you. He'll text it to you. Hi.
Morgan, nice to meet
Morgan,
you.
nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. Hello. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Climate voters.
Right on. Thank you. Right on. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, okay. We get to see each other again.
We're going to take 3 just to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Hello. Abby.
Mila.
Mila, thank you for being here.
Mila, Abby, over here. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Hey, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. You all. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. You all have a good one. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Nice to meet you.
Right this way, please. Thank you so much for being here.
Honor's mine. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. With me? Thank you for coming out and welcoming us. Hey.
Thank you so much.
Beto, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Hi there, Beto. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having us out. Oh no. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, thanks for coming out. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. Right this way.
Thanks for coming out.
It's a pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Nice toss. Right this way. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for coming out. Spread the word.
Here you go. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. I'm going to sign 2 of these just to make sure that we get everybody there. Thank you. Hi.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you.
Here we go. I like it. There you go.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you so much. I'm voting for you.
No way!
My dad
You
says
own, like-
thank you for playing 95 in Auburn, Alabama.
Whoa, was he there?
Hell yeah, he was.
Really?
Yes.
There's a video of that online.
Really?
It's, I think the song is called Telephone Wires, and you can find it online. That is absolutely amazing. This is the record. And did your dad buy it?
Yes.
Okay, that is so cool. What's your name?
Aaliyah.
Aaliyah, and your dad is?
Russell.
Russell. Tell him I said thank you.
I will.
Yeah, this is so great.
I want to get a picture.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Love it.
That is so cool. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Aaliyah, thanks for being here.
That's all. Nice to meet you.
Casey, good to meet you.
There we go.
Right on. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
here,
so
man.
much.
Thank
That was
you.
awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, my friend and I drove for an hour.
And 3. Got it.
Thank you for
All right.
making the drive.
All right,
Be safe. Bye.
Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
3. All right.
Thanks for coming out.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Told you we get in there.
Hey.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
Hi.
to meet you.
Nice to meet
I
you.
believe in you.
Oh, I believe in you too.
Right this way, please. Thank you.
Hey,
Well,
how
my
are you?
grandma volunteered for you in
Oh,
Texas.
yes. Where?
Austin.
All right.
There you go, Austin.
Right on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this yours?
Hey, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
From Magnolia.
Oh, right on.
Here, 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's a great picture.
Thank you.
You like that place?
This way, guys. Thank you so much.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Austin and Boston now.
1, 2, 3.
We spent a lot of time there. Yeah.
Right this way.
Thank you.
Working on your volunteer campaign.
Right on already.
Smile.
Thank you. Really
Right
appreciate
this
it.
way, please, man.
Hey.
Good. Thank you so much.
I was happy to. This is a great response, so thank you for being part of it. Hey, looking sharp.
Is this all yours? All right, here you go.
Thanks for coming out. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Hey.
How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm well. I really want to have a more of a deeper conversation about healthcare.
Okay.
Because I know you ran on Medicare for All, and then you pivoted away from that. And
Yeah.
I'm basically running the Medicare for All campaign.
Oh, great.
In the state, and have been briefed by Pramila Jayapal,
Yeah.
as well as
Great.
Debbie Dingle, who's Spitfire.
Right.
I love her. I met her in DC for the launch. So my question is, like, if you don't support that bill, what do you support, and will you protect us from the corporate greed of the insurance and pharmaceutical companies? Because right now, I'm going bankrupt. Like in
Yeah.
a year, my son turns 18. I'm going to have a double insurance payment.
Right.
I can't. That's not sustainable for my family. And I have a good job, so I know there's people way worse off than I am.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And I'm glad that you're advocating for them. So there's.
Sorry, I'm taking.
No, you're good. I want to make sure I give you a specific answer because you asked me a specific question.
And now she has my camera. I can't record it or anything, but go ahead.
Pramila is a hero, and I love what she's doing. Jan Schakowsky, Rosa DeLauro also introduced something
Yes.
called Medicare for America.
Yes.
And so you have employer-based insurance, and you want to keep it. There's some who don't, but if you want to keep it, you can. I think it reduces a little bit of the anxiety that some people
Sure.
feel. And everyone else who does not have insurance or who wants to move from employer-based insurance is enrolled in Medicare. I think that's my opinion, that it is the fastest way to get us to full universal guarantee.
So as a transitional piece.
As a transitional piece.
Okay.
And I think I agree with everyone, and I said, and I
Because to me, like, that's the vision. That's the vision of what we need to get to.
Absolutely.
And I want people to get on board with that vision. So, all right, we got to move it. We got to move it. You're tall. All right.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thanks so much for taking
Appreciate
the time.
the work that you're doing. Yeah. Hey, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We just want to get you around this way. Clear up some space.
Thank you.
Okay, can you make sure that that picture of you and the Dalmatian is uploaded?
Yes.
Please.
Did we take one?
I don't know.
See if you can find it. We did.
All right, nice to meet
Thank you for coming out.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Hi,
Hey, thanks for asking the question.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a bunch of college Dems from Massachusetts here. So after we all take individuals, can we take a big group one?
Absolutely,
Thank
yeah.
you. We loved phone banking for your Senate race every week.
You're so good. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So we'll take these individually and we'll
You can
walk
use
them
my phone,
together.
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Hello. How you doing, Amherst?
Would you do a pose with me?
Sure. What is it?
It's tussed up. It's the Amherst thing we do when we're going to football games. So we go like this.
Tuss up.
Thank
Right on.
you.
Thank you.
We're just going to gather you guys over here.
Hey, nice to meet you. Thanks for
Now,
coming out.
please, we'll gather you over there.
Hello. How are you? Hola, ¿qué dice? How are you, man? Great. Thanks for coming out. C-SPAN, I like it.
Last one. Can we hold you?
Hey, thank you for being here.
All right. Come back in real quick.
Come back in quick.
Come back in.
Yeah, she got it.
Come back in. I'm going to get out of the shot.
Four college time.
All right. Right out this way, please. Right out this way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you.
Thanks for coming
Right
out.
this way, please. Thank you.
Hello. How you doing? Great, great. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Hey, thanks for coming out.
Hey, email me.
Thank you very much.
That's right.
Hi. Shannon? Nice to meet you.
Hi, John.
John.
My wife and I are both public high school teachers.
Oh.
21 years, 27
What do you
years.
teach?
English.
It's an English major, and to my parents' lasting disappointment. But it's been a great lesson.
Turned out okay for you.
Yes.
You've done all right.
Yes. And how you make something of it. Thank you both for what you do. It's so important.
Thank you very much
Yes.
for what you're doing, and I sincerely hope that you can help us out.
Thank you. Yeah. Right.
Best of luck.
Thank you for the public service. Really mean it. Thanks.
Thanks so much for
Hey,
great to meet you.
nice to meet you. Oh, we're gonna stand this way to get a perfect picture. Thanks, man.
Thank you again.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Right, this
Hey.
I love what you had to say about teachers. I'm glad
Thank
I'm
you.
come to teach.
Right on. Right on. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you so much.
Hey, I wouldn't miss it.
And if you make it, need forestry advice, check the Forest Service right there. I'm a man.
Right on. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you for coming so much. Hey, thanks for being here.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, we got it.
Thank you very much. Hey,
You want to learn from this stage? Look up First Robotics, incredible educational program, any high school. First Robotics, it's a high school robotics mentorship competition.
Okay.
Amazing program. The country needs more of it in education. If we're going to take on climate change, we need, similar to how in Apollo, we overhauled our country's education. This is the kind of program that is doing it right now. It's in nearly every high school in the country, in the state here. It's also especially big in Michigan. I believe there are about 3,000 teams in the country. It partners professional mentors with high school students building giant robots. They're in the midst of their competition season now. It's incredible. Check it out.
I want to check it out. Absolutely. Thanks for the tip. I had not heard of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to look it up.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. Got lots of them.
First robotics, wrote it down. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, right this way.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi. Oh, I love that. Very nice.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for
really
coming out.
appreciate it. This way.
How's it
going?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
1, 2, 3. I only took 2 selfies. Sorry about that.
You have 2 seconds to sit there. Hey, I'm doing well. Tell me your name.
I'm Isaac.
Isaac. Beto.
Nice to meet you.
That is a great name. Isaac.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Hey, it's really impressive that you're not taking any money from super PACs.
Or packs of any
Yeah,
kind.
it's one of those things that not a lot of people focus on, but it's definitely really healthy for everybody.
Thank you for saying that.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate the
Nice to meet
encouragement.
you.
Hey, good. How are you doing?
Great.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for being here. Of course. Thank you.
2 and 3. We got it.
Whose drum kit is that on the back?
That is nothing in particular. My girlfriend got it for me because I play the drums.
It looks cool.
All right, thank you so
Right
much.
on. We'll see you. Hey. Thank you so much. Beto, nice to meet you.
Very cute.
Oh, right on. Hi. Nice to meet you. Group chat. All right. This will be a good one.
Ready, guys? 1, 2, 3. We got it.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it so much. Hi. How are you? Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out.
I appreciate you talking about dignity of people. I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you. Thanks.
So 1, 2, big smile. Thank you.
Thank you for the positive reinforcement.
Yes.
Thank you. Right this way. Hi. Thank you so much. How are you?
Thank you for supporting people of color.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for saying that. Tell me your name.
Gargi.
Gargi. Nice to meet you. Thanks for welcoming us here. Felt good.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. We got it.
Thank you.
Our first visit to New Hampshire, so thank you, Gargi. Thank
Am I
you.
using this phone?
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Beto.
I'm Benji.
Nice to meet you.
I
Yeah.
got it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. We got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Hi,
Katie, thank you for coming out. I appreciate how seriously you're taking climate change, but I'm only going to vote for someone who supports the Green New Deal. And I was wondering, do you support the Green New Deal?
I do, I know that many of the details have yet to be worked out, and I think that's part of the leadership that we're looking for. Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
I love its
thank you.
ambition. I love its boldness.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We got it.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming. Hi. Thanks for coming out. Thank you.
This way, please. Can I just have you come this way? Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm a live stream person.
Oh, are you really?
I'm also one of your texters.
Thank you for helping us in the race, and thank you for knowing Chris and Cynthia.
I'm already texting from you.
You are? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
I
much.
was texting while I was waiting for you.
Tell me your name.
Ruth.
Ruth. Very nice to meet you
Nice
in
to meet
person.
you.
I guess we've met virtually before.
Virtually.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much
Yeah.
for running.
Of course.
Hi. Brian Bethel, I'm a professor here at Keene State.
Oh, wonderful.
Welcome to New
What
England.
do you teach?
Occupational safety and health.
Okay, right on. Thank you. Thanks for welcoming us.
Yes, welcome to New England.
Right on.
Right this way.
We'll see you soon, I hope. Yeah.
Can I have you this way, please?
Hey there.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Jack.
Jack. Right on. Go, Jack. Thank you, man. Hi. What's your name?
I'm Jill.
Jill. I'm Beto. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Beto. Nice to meet you. Sarah. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks for wearing the shirt. Yeah, appreciate it. And thanks for the
Thank you
warm
so
welcome
much.
here. It made us feel good coming
This way, please. Thank you so much.
Hi, Beto. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
1, 2, 3, we got it. All right, you're next.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Jeff.
Can I have you come right this way, please?
Hello. Beto. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I asked the INF question.
Oh, right on.
Great question.
That was really
There
good.
you go.
Thank you for asking.
Right this way, please. Can I just have you come this way? Thank you so
Hello.
much.
Nice to meet you.
Got it. There you go.
There you go. Thank you.
Right this way,
Gracias.
please. Thank you so much for coming.
Hi, Beto. Nice to meet you. Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. I'm gonna grab a glass of water.
Right this way, please. Thank you so much.
Get a little water break going.
Hey,
Hi,
how are you?
Carrie. I'm from Friends of the Earth Action, and we were really just wondering, can you commit to a Green New Deal that has a plan to get us entirely off fossil fuels, including natural gas?
So, yes, I support the Green New Deal. I think the goal has to be net zero emissions, which, as you know, means that we are both reducing our emissions, but we're also capturing more of the carbon that's in the air. I think that allows us to make the transition necessary. And it may, just to answer the specifics of your question, may not mean that we stop completely emitting all greenhouse gases, but that we get to net zero emissions. And so I think that's the language they use in the Green New Deal, and that's the language that I support.
Okay,
Thank you.
for answering
Yeah,
my question.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. We got it. There you go.
Thank you, man.
Right this way, please. Can I have you?
Same phone?
Yeah, same phone. Okay, same phone. I'm sending him the picture.
Okay,
Nice
that's
to
all.
meet you. I'd like to answer the Green New Deal.
1, 2, 3. We got it.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Mike.
Mike,
Great
Beto.
to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Hi, here we go, Mike. We got it.
I'm feeling awful short.
Sorry about that.
Right this way, please. Thank you so much
Hey,
for being here.
Beto. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thanks for coming out. What's your name?
My name's Jack.
Jack. Nice to meet you, Jack. You want to take a photo?
Oh yeah.
Let's do
Here
it.
we go, Jack. 1, 2, 3. We got it.
Thanks for taking the time to come out. Very nice to meet you. Thank
Right
you.
this way, please, Jack. Thank you so much for being here.
Beto. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. My name's Peter. Thank you for
Peter. Yeah.
Look over here. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Thank you for welcoming us.
you
Really
so
felt
much for
good.
coming. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye, Peter.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Beto.
Antonia.
Nice to meet you, Antonia. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Nice to meet you.
Can we move you right over here, please? Thank you so much.
Hey there.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for welcoming us.
1, 2, 3. One more. All right.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a
much.
lot.
This way, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beto. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Ken.
1, 2, 3. We got it.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Hey, how are you?
Great.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Right on.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you very much.
This way, sir. Thanks for coming.
Hey, I'm Beto. What's your name? Alex. Alex, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Well, I think they're trying to bring up the camera on your.
Oh, it's scroll up and then.
There it is.
All right. We got it. 1, 2, 3. Now, it looks really dark, but I'm sure it's okay, right?
Yeah.
All right, you want to check it? Just to make sure. All right, next, come on
Yeah,
up.
it's never coming out.
Beto,
Right this way, please.
Hey,
Thank you.
thank you.
1, 2, 3. We got you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
supporting us. Appreciate it.
Right this way.
Hey,
Nice to meet you.
tell me your name. Paul. Paul, nice to meet you.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I think that works, Paul.
You want me to sign that, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right here.
Okay.
You want one by yourself? Oh. We gotta do this quickly, okay?
Yeah, their phone's gonna die, so I'll get out of your way.
You got it.
Thanks for waiting. You have to wait a long time?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Oh, no, come on.
Hi.
Super quick.
Tell me your name.
Before the camera runs out.
Liam, Beto. Do you want to join us? Stephanie. Stephanie, nice to meet you.
Look say hello. We made it. They were worried about the camera not lasting, but it worked.
Thank you.
There you
He
go.
Liam. Thank you, baseball. He was wondering.
I absolutely would.
We actually just bought that and we didn't even think about it today. And I made him go out to the car to get it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Liam. Let me see. The right place.
I think this is better for the ball.
Yeah, the Sharpies are
Right?
Yeah.
These are balls.
All right. There you go. Thank you for coming in. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Somebody, you'll remember.
Hi, Beto. Nice to meet you, Lori.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, I wouldn't miss it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not good at this.
You did great. Great.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Doing everything that we can, including not taking any back money.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Hello. How are you? Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming out. Right. Appreciate it. Hi, Beto. Ryan, nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Right this way. Thank you so much.
Hey. What's your name?
Meg.
M-E-G?
Yeah.
All right.
Action shot.
All right.
You're welcome. Here you go. Thank you for coming out. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hi. Beto, what's your name?
I'm Aaron Keene.
Aaron, nice to meet you. Yeah.
Oh, you got it right here. You want to sign this? Right, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. Yeah. Do you have a camera that you wanted a picture taken with you?
Yeah. I'll take it. I'll send it to you. I'll take it and text it to you. All right. Right here. No, right here. Right here. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Right on. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Over here. Get a number.
Hey, how are you?
Ready?
That's
Over
nice to meet you.
here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We got you. There we go.
Right on. Thank you very much. Hey, how are you?
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right, we got it.
Appreciate it. Not much of one. My kids play. My kids play, so watch them. Again, thank
One
you.
question.
Yes.
Do you ski?
Not well. Not well.
All right, guys, ready? 1, 2, 3. We got 3.
Thank you.
You ski?
Thank you. Yes, I do.
Okay, right on.
Oh, I see you out there.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
That's all. Nice to meet you.
Best of luck. We got your picture. There we go.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Saying
Thank you
hello
for
to
coming.
us. Yeah.
Right this way, please.
Thank you. Oh, okay.
We got it.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Excuse me. Hi. How are you? Nice to meet you. Like your phone case.
Thank you very much.
Here it comes.
Slide in. Sorry. Thanks. We're just going to start with local press and then we'll go to national press.
All right, I'm the local CBS.
Wait.
Sorry, are you Keene State?
Keene State.
I'm WKBK from here in Keene.
Okay, so I guess you're good.
Cameras are this way.
Sorry,
So-
wait, so hold on. Time out. I'm gonna hang out and answer everyone's questions. Just give us a chance to get organized.
You on television.
Yeah.
Word. Okay, so if you are going to ask a question, why don't you come over here so I can answer the question and they
Down
can
in
see.
front.
Appreciate it, guys.
There we go. Back up a little bit.
We can get along.
All right, so what do you make of Keene so far? And New Hampshire?
I love it. A really warm welcome. Great questions, some really tough questions among them. And then a lot of kind words at the end of the town hall. Folks came up and said, I'm grateful that you're here. Some have traveled an hour or 2 hours to join us. So this is democracy at its finest. This is a state that takes its responsibility to the rest of the country very seriously. So just grateful that I get to participate in this process and very glad to be here.
So in a tough swing state like New Hampshire, how do you appeal to all voters?
You show up for everyone. Over the next 2 days, we will go to every single county in New Hampshire. We will never distinguish between red or blue, rural or urban. All of us at the end of the day are Americans first, and so we're going to treat one another accordingly. We're also going to make sure that we keep this conversation elevated about our ambitions, our aspirations, not who we don't like, not who we are against, but what we are for. That's what appeals to me. And that's the way that I feel most comfortable running this race. And so that's what we're going to do in New Hampshire.
When you travel over through these 10 counties, you're going to go to a lot of rural places where industry is sort of fading away. What do you tell those voters that are looking for opportunity, they're looking for more jobs to come their direction?
We've got to be able to invest in their communities. We've also got to look at some of this president's policies that have done significant and potentially lasting damage to so much of America. I was just in Ohio, in Lordstown, where you see a shuttered GM plant. Heard stories from UAW employees and Michigan, and now hear a lot of anxiety in New Hampshire about proposed cuts to the Portsmouth Navy Yard and the jobs that are located there. So we've got to make sure that we're investing in our communities, investing in the workers who've built this country's strength and success in the first place, guaranteeing a living wage, ensuring that unions are strengthened, not diminished, so that more people have a skill and a trade and a discipline that commands a living wage. We need a president who reflects all of that ambition for people and communities, not corporations and the powerful and the wealthy.
On lowering the voting age, the federal voting age to 16.
It's not lost on me that so many of the people who come to these town hall meetings everywhere across the country are young. They're not the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders right now of this minute. On gun violence, on climate change, on healthcare for all, it's very often the youngest among us who are leading this fight and demanding answers from those who seek positions of public trust. So I'm open to the idea of a younger voting age. I want to listen to people, learn more about it. It's a new idea to me, but I got to tell you, there's some merit in it, just given the number of young people who are leading the conversation right now in so many parts of this country.
New Hampshire is crippled by an opioid epidemic. How would you address that first step?
I'd listen to the people of New Hampshire. I was talking to Congresswoman Annie Custer today. Since New Hampshire's been ground zero in an opioid crisis that's seen tens of thousands of Americans lose their lives, we talked about accountability for those who are responsible for this in the first place. The vast majority of everyone who overdoses on opioids first began with a legally prescribed medication. Then they very often turn to street drugs like heroin or fentanyl. Those who marketed opioids to the American public and said that they were not addictive must face justice, consequences, and accountability. Those who are addicted to opioids must not face jail terms, but instead receive compassion and care and help long-term getting back on their feet. And then those first responders, those EMS techs, those police officers, those firefighters, who are very often on the front line of meeting those who are struggling with opioid addiction, should be given every resource to be able to prevail in this fight. So I'll listen to the communities, the leaders within those communities, to make sure that we end this scourge in America.
Congressman, we heard you talk about dreamers, and we heard you talk about undocumented immigrants. What is Beto O'Rourke's immigration policy?
Let's free those dreamers who have already contributed so much to our country's success from any fear of deportation to a country whose language they do not speak, where they do not have family, by making them U.S. citizens in this, their home country, where they are as American as anyone else, even if that's not reflected in their documentation. Let's not do that at the price of their parents, the original dreamers. Let's ensure they also can stay in this country and are able to have a path towards citizenship. Let's acknowledge that there are millions of our fellow Americans who are working some of the toughest jobs in the shadows, sometimes paid less than a minimum wage. Let's bring them out of the shadows, which will demonstrably make us safer. We'll know who is in our communities. They can get right with the law and contribute even more to our success. Let's honor our asylum laws and our international obligations for those who have no other home and have no other prospect than to come to this country. We don't need walls. We don't need to militarize our borders. We need to rewrite our immigration laws in those ways that I just described that reflect our values, the reality on the ground, and the best traditions of this great country that's comprised of immigrants, asylum seekers, and refugees from the world over.
Bernie Sanders yesterday announced that
You have expressed support for changing the Supreme Court or changing the Electoral College. Is there any concern about these drastic changes to democratic small d institutions?
Absolutely. At a time that almost every single democratic institution, from the press to the judiciary to the integrity of the ballot box, is under attack from without this country and from within this country, I think we have to very soberly decide these issues. But also at a time that our democracy is so corrupted and captured and ineffectual, unable to pass budgets, unable to keep itself from closing from closing down. And given the challenges that we face, we need to do everything we can to make sure that it works. So you're right. If we were to change the composition of the Supreme Court, that should not be done by Democrats or Republicans. That's a conversation for the entire country. Maybe we set term limits on those justices so that we have more regular turnover and a greater ability to infuse new experiences and perspective on the highest court in the land. When it comes to the Electoral College, it's very hard to explain to ourselves, we who purport to be the world's greatest democracy, that the person who got 3 million more votes was the loser in the last presidential election. If we want more people to vote, if we want everyone's vote to count, then we should be able to count on the fact that that person who gets more popular votes will be the next president of the United States. Again, I want to make sure that's a conversation that we have as a country, Republicans and Democrats, rural and urban communities. But this democracy right now is not working to its full potential. We need to free it from the capture of big money. We need to make sure that members of Congress aren't choosing their own districts. And we have to look at some of these institutional reforms, whether it is the Supreme Court, the Electoral College, the filibuster in the Senate. We've got to get democracy and our institutions working again.
Do you support eliminating the filibuster?
I think that's something that we should seriously consider. Given the kind of changes that we need, ensuring that every single American can see a doctor, an economy that works for all, a living wage for everyone working in this country, and combating climate change in the 12 years that are left to us, we are going to need sure action out of our Congress. So I want to make sure that there is not the obstruction that stands in the way of getting that action, that change that so many Americans desperately want to see.
Yesterday, Bernie Sanders said he was unionizing his campaign. First time anyone has done that. Is that something you would consider for your campaign?
Absolutely. If those who work on this campaign and who comprise what I hope will be the largest grassroots effort this nation has ever seen want to unionize, I support that all the way. In the meantime, I'm going to make sure that we pay among, if not the highest wages, that everyone who works on the campaign is paid a living wage, excellent health care, child care, so that everyone can work whatever their conditions are. But if these employees also want to unionize, I absolutely support that.
And could you give us an update on your fundraising?
I'm going to release an update tomorrow morning, and very excited to share that with you all, but that'll be tomorrow morning.
The topic of gun rights continues to be an issue.
So I'm promised to come back to you, but this gentleman's been waiting patiently. Why don't you come forward?
Okay.
Yeah.
There might not be any room for you to come forward. I'll just give you the question.
Okay.
Yeah. So you had student loan forgiveness to one of the students here. I was wondering, what are some things you might want to add to the public service loan forgiveness program that started in 2007 that you think are maybe too restrictive now? Do you want us to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. There's no shortage of needs in this country, no shortage of communities that are shrinking and diminishing in size, that need people to move back or to move there in the first place. So I mentioned service to veterans who put their lives on the line for this country in a VA that is 49,000 positions unfilled right now. I mentioned teaching in schools that are lacking for school teachers who are not moving into the profession or not moving to a given community. If we look back to one of the greatest efforts of building and rebuilding this country in the wake of the Great Depression, as we still recover from the Great Recession, conservation corps, improving access to our public lands, making sure that our communities receive the attention and care that they need, whether that is infrastructure, whether that is upkeep, whether that is in quality of life amenities that make those communities competitive and livable. I think all of those are forms of public service that we should be able to expect from one another.
And just a quick local thing here. So there's obviously a lot of people talk about 5G right now. New Hampshire, there are pretty substantial broadband issues. Local member told me that before we get a 5G, we should get 4G here in the Monadnock region first. I was wondering, with all that debate and the ideas about Huawei and China, what would you do to try to keep rural communities involved in those innovations and to get them the services that are kind of lagging behind the rest of the country?
So thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that about New Hampshire. Was just in Pennsylvania, where a local representative told me that 80% of rural Pennsylvania does not have reliable broadband internet. In Texas, 50%, half the state, half of the rural part of the state cannot get online. So trying to finish your education, starting a business, doing anything that you want to do that involves the internet becomes almost impossible. And then back to this point that I'm trying to make about dwindling smaller and rural communities, attracting people back if they can't get online is going to be close to impossible. So I mentioned the FDR administration in your last question. I'll mention it again. FDR devised the Rural Electrification Administration to make sure that rural communities all across this country could have electricity, so that that first grader could read by electric light in Silverton, Texas, the same way they could in Boston or New York or Tokyo or London. I think a partnership with communities for broadband internet makes sense. And from every single person that I've spoken to in these rural communities, they do not want a handout, they do not want government to solve all their problems, but they do want a partner with whom they can work. And that model from 1937 in the REA, where you established cooperatives, where everyone came together to ensure that you could make those communities competitive, might very well be the model that we're looking for going forward in this country. Thank you.
One more.
Yep.
Thanks.
What are your advantages compared to the other Democratic candidates?
That'll be something for the voters of New Hampshire and this country to decide. Some things that I want them to know about me: lifelong resident of the U.S.-Mexico border, small business owner who met a payroll every week and knows what that's like to hire, to create jobs, to expand economic development and opportunity in a community, especially a community that was desperate for those kind of jobs, like El Paso. Served on a nonpartisan city council where we weren't Republicans or Democrats. We just had to get things done for those constituents whom we served. Every year that I was in Congress, I was in the minority. So the only ability to get anything done for veterans or preserving public lands or improving border safety and facilitating more trade and job growth was done with a Republican partner, finding common ground, conceding a little bit so that the perfect did not become the enemy of the good. And then I just campaigned in a state that heretofore was thought to be too red to run in if you were a Democrat. That was 50th in the nation in voter turnout. We went to every single county, didn't write anybody off, didn't take anybody for granted, saw voter turnout amongst young people up 500%, saw a state that went from dead last to moving up, to being a state that's at the table, a state that some believe will have a seat at the table in the Democratic nominating process and a seat at the table in selecting the next president. In other words, not only are those 38 electoral votes now in play, my fellow Texans are going to become a priority for the presidential candidates. And that's good for Texas, that's good for this country, and that's something I hope to be able to bring to this national campaign. So thank you.
Texas? Do you think you could win Texas if you were the nominee?
Yes, I think we can win Texas. I think we've proven that we know how to campaign. We've been to each one of those 254 counties. We've listened to the stories our fellow Texans have told us. We've incorporated it in the way that we campaign and the way in which I wish to serve. So thank you all for coming out. Look forward to seeing you across New Hampshire over the coming days. All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Go this way.
Yep.
Business card?
Yeah.
Someone's still working with you.
And it's not. Oh.
All right, my boss, my brand manager, Dan Mitchell, is more likely going to be reaching out to you. We're based in Keene, West Stream, more than likely